Hello and welcome to Politically Incorrect Knitters. My name is Pinkava, joined as always by the lovely Deplorable Knitter, and we have an extra special guest today, Keri Smith from Deprogrammed.
Hello, ladies.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Keri.
It's me. I bring bad tech mojo with me everywhere.
It's okay. It's okay. Before we find out who Keri is, because I know a lot of our people know, but I'm sure some of you guys haven't run across her yet, which is unfortunate for you, but luckily we're going to tell you. But this is our giveaway we've been talking about for, I don't know, the whole month of May, I think. And so we have a box of yarn from Callius Designs, and we have Cody Schlegel's Odyssey Tale. And our lucky winner for this giveaway is Denise Mangini. So please email Politically Incorrect Knitters to get your prizes sent to you. Congratulations. So excited.
This episode is sponsored by Chicken Lady Fiber Arts. You can get 20% off your order with the code PIK Mayday 20, and you can get Deprogrammed yarn, which is made in Keri's honor.
I love that so much. She sent me some of that. She asked me, "What's your favorite color?" I said, "Blue." "What kind of blue?" I said, "All blues." And then she put all blues in it. It's beautiful. Anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's so pretty. I'm working on something with it right now. And I know that there's people in our Telegram, in the Politically Incorrect Knitters Telegram group, that have like designed things with it, and very lucky to have your own color, especially as a not so avid knitter.
That's true. I need to get knitting. I actually brought some of my knitting today to show you, but it's very old and it's embarrassing, and I haven't done this before. So I figured you could tell me.
We all start somewhere.
Yeah. You could tell me if it's actually crap or not. I don't know if you want me to show you now or later.
Sure.
Well, so about 10 or 15 years ago, I did go through a big knitting phase. I was knitting all the time. It was very cathartic. I made scarves for my grandma, my mom. I really liked this kind of very soft. And so I never got past the scarf and hat phase. And I would drop stitches, and it looks kind of probably for a professional. I think it's probably bad. Is it bad? I made a lot like this, like just soft. I love wine color. I made a lot in the wine color and a lot in the green. And then what else? Well, I know the hats are bad because I never actually learned how to properly do a hat, like how to do rounded stuff. I just would make it up as I went and drop stitches. So this is like a purple hat that I made. That is it?
I don't know. It's pretty cute.
On a scale of 1 to 10, is it maybe a 4?
It doesn't look terrible at all. That's the thing people forget. Like at our homeschool co-op, I teach knitting classes, and so like I'll show my students something and I'll be like, "Here, this is what we're trying to make," and there's like has holes in it and stuff, and I'll be like, "But guys, remember, I've been doing this for 30 years. So when I started, it looked like that too." Like everybody's got to start somewhere, and I think they look nice.
Well, thank you. And I did a couple. I couldn't find it when my grandma passed away. I got some of the ones I made for her back, but I couldn't find those. I think they're in a box with her stuff. But with hers, I was pretty proud of myself because I figured out how at the end of the scarf, I doubled it over and I made pockets for her, which I was like, I thought I was proud of it. I was like, pockets at the end of a scarf. And this one I know is crap though, because this is crochet. And apparently if you do a crocheted scarf, it kind of, see how it curls up?
Right.
Maybe you're not supposed to crochet scarves, but I don't know. See how it curls up at the end? Like that.
You can crochet anything. It could just be the way you did it, losing stitches in between or adding stitches. It's normal.
Well, there you go.
That's cool.
So I haven't really picked it up in over 10 years. And then when I met all you knitters, I was like, I should get back to that. And I actually, after talking to Neil James from Block Magazine, who talked about how he used knitting to stop smoking, and talking to, at least online, with the Nibble guys, and he used knitting to help with food cravings and stuff. And it just it reminded me that it's something you can use to focus your mind, and any kind of anything that you might have that's a compulsive habit that you want to get rid of. It's a good thing to replace that with. And so I keep saying I'm getting back into it, and I haven't yet, but I'm gonna go to that retreat.
Oh, you're gonna go to Knitting McCurley's retreat, or not that one?
The one in North Carolina?
Yeah.
That's the plan
Yeah.
anyway. We haven't bought tickets yet, but we are planning. My husband and I are planning on going, and he's going to make like a music trip out of it along the way.
That's cool. So why don't you tell our guests, or not our guests, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about like who you are, what your channel is, that kind of.
Sure. So my name is Keri Smith. I host a podcast called Deprogrammed, and it started as a series on my old channel. It started as a way for me to understand my old belief system. So I was coming out of 20 years in the social justice left, not liberalism, but the social justice left, which is very different. And it took me a while to even understand that it was different. I thought I was in liberalism for a long time. And when I started leaving that belief system and understanding that, wait a minute, this people in my circle and this like small echo chamber that I've crafted for myself of people who believe what I do, they're suddenly advocating for violence, for censorship, these very illiberal things. And so in trying to understand what it was that I had been in for 2 decades, I started doing interviews with people about it. And at that time, when I first started talking to people about it, was maybe 3 years ago now, maybe 4. And it was so, at that time, it seemed so kind of scary to do, because you're having to, there weren't a lot of people criticizing it back then. The first person I found that helped me make sense of what I was seeing was Jordan Peterson. And he really had a huge impact on my life. But then I started seeing more people, and you start finding more people online that have been there for a while doing this and learning from them. And so I wanted to talk to all these different people, and people who had woken up a long time ago, people who were never in the social justice left, and then people like myself who were leaving it or had left it recently. And so I've been fortunate to be able to interview everyone from professors like Brett Weinstein, James Lindsay, Dr. Charles Murray, to comedians like Chrissy Mayer, people who talk about social justice and pop culture like Gary from Nerdrotic, Ryan Cannell, Az from Hill versus Babyface. He makes me smile. And like Drunk 3PO, like those kind of pop culture people who are talking about it. And then also knitters. I've talked to people like you, DK. I had on an interview to talk about the social justice infiltration of the knitting world, the Instagram world. I've talked to Marie Buskey and Maria Tuscan of Tuscan Knits. I still haven't talked to Sockmatician. That's coming. I want to interview him. Just about like where he is now. That's so interesting to me. Like what happens after you go through a mobbing and a cancellation and come out on the other side? Because I think that's really inspirational for people to see.
Yeah.
You can survive all that. You can survive everyone saying the worst about you and some people believing that, and you can still come out of something traumatic like that on the other end, and it's okay.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to him about that.
Yeah, and I think he would be interesting too, because the other knitters that you've had on are conservative or conservative leaning, and so he never was. And so I think that would be interesting to talk to him, just to see how his experience is different from, mine or Maria Tuscan's or that kind of thing. But
definitely,
that's interesting.
Because he created the diversity hashtag. I mean, he, in some ways, I don't know if he would call himself, and he and I did talk on Skype, and we messaged back and forth for a while. I can't remember if he called himself social justice at the time or not, but he was definitely in that world. He definitely traveled in those circles, and then to be attacked by your own tribe That's also very different. It's sort of not just your own tribe in terms of like the knitting tribe, but to be attacked by the social justice tribe within knitting. That's got to be a little different.
I'm sure it is. And that's something that Ann and I started saying early on, is that, well, now they've gotten rid of all the conservatives, so who are they going to have to go after? Yes. So they start eating their own.
And that's something from the beginning too, that, sometimes, you get messages from people like, oh, well, I'd like to do a podcast or something, and I'm not sure, because there's kind of the online hate mob. And it is very different from, I'm a conservative and I've always been a conservative, and you're just out there that way. And when you've, bought into the social justice world, and you are a good, true believer, and then they find something wrong with you, that, it's, that you're expected to play within the rules. And when you apologize and everything, they still come after you for not being good enough. And I think it's sort of a different standard. We always knew you were horrible, versus, oh no, you're being hypocritical. You are inconsistent in your own mindset.
Oh yes. They're calling their brothers to account, basically. They're sort of saying, it is almost worse, because they consider you, if at that point at some point you stop bending the knee, and you stop kissing the ring, and you stop apologizing, making the demanded apologies, which, by the way, can we just talk about in social justice? I don't understand anybody who demands an apology. If you end up getting the apology, what is it worth? Why would you demand? And I'm not just talking about social justice people. I'm talking about people in our lives too, like people who make those kind of demands. Like, I will not speak to you again until you do X, Y, Z. It's like, what is that worth at that point? If that person does it, then you just demanded it. It's not like they came to it out of heartfelt contemplation and sincerity. It's
not like wow, I really was the jerk here.
Yeah. When you're coerced, it's just not the same. It's
not the same. And so if a person who's in that social justice world stops doing that, well, now you're a heretic. And that was my experience, because I had spoken it, I had pushed it for so long. I pushed it in my career. I used to work in entertainment. I managed comedians and produced stuff for TV and film. And that was what I was known as, was sort of what they called me, the feminist manager. I was in the feminist part of social justice. That's how I got brought in. But I was whole hog, because you get brought in one way, like maybe through the gender ideology part, or the race ideology part, or the sexuality part. You get brought in one of these doors, but then you're expected to accept all of it. And I had. And so when I suddenly started showing signs that I was questioning this belief system, I had all those people in my life. Could you cultivate this echo chamber when you're in a cult of only people who agree with your cult, with your ideology? And it's like, what's happening to you? We need to do an intervention. We need to fly to Texas, which happened.
Oh, for real? They flew to Texas to tell you how bad you were?
I had a friend, she was here for work, actually, in the entertainment industry, one of my best friends. She was actually here to do a documentary about trans children, which is how far we've parted ways on our beliefs. And while she was here, yes, she had, we went to dinner, and it was like the TV show Intervention, sort of. It was sort of all of our friends have been calling me, because everyone knew I was closest with her, and asking me what's going on with you, and your posts are changing online. At that time I was shocked that Donald Trump won. I was one of those people who cried when he won, and I was trying to figure out what happened, because I thought if I could figure out, if we didn't want him to get in again, and 4 years later, we should figure out why he won. And I was looking into it and posting different things I was finding about PC culture, about wokeness, and that was a no-no. That was a no-no for the cult. Social justice.
I was about to say, like, "Ooh, you're a rare liberal then," because I mean, when Donald Trump was elected, I was on the team. Holy crud, he did it! Like, I remember sitting there election night going like, wait, we might actually win this. And not that I didn't want this to happen and I didn't vote for him or anything, but I'm like, wait, hang on, it actually happened. So, and then I remember the next day, it was like this bizarre combination of very, Democrat parents weeping and sobbing, saying that they've had to explain to their kids that they might have to, keep their immigrant neighbors in the basement because Donald Trump is going to burst down the door. And I'm like, and then you put it on Facebook as if nobody reads that. What are you doing? You're clearly not actually afraid of this. Or the Republicans who are like, oh, well, I don't like him that much, but they're bending the knee already. Oh, well, but I guess we had to. And that kind of weird dichotomy thing. But I remember the news coverage because at the time I didn't have cable and the only news coverage was for free that I found on YouTube that night was NBC, and watching the meltdown was amazing. But it was all, it's your fault. There was no introspection of we lost the election and what are we going to do now? How are we going to appeal to people? It was they're wrong, they're horrible, and we hate them. There was no, let's find common ground here. Let's appeal to the people who may have voted for Trump last election. There was none of that, which was surprising to me.
Yeah, see, I the way I reacted to it at the time, and keep in mind, I was still in the cult then. I had only started questioning things in like the summer of 2016. Leading up to the election, I had only started questioning my belief system then. And I still held on to, you come out of a cult slowly, just like you go into it. And so, I mean, I remember I was writing down all my thoughts then, and I was still calling him a demagogue. And the way I was approaching it then was, and in my post was sort of like, yes, I know we're all hurting and grieving, and I had a friend who couldn't get up off the floor crying.
Wow.
She had to have people help take care of the kids because it was so, I knew none of my friends went to work for like a week. People just called out like trauma, right? And so I was kind of
that always surprises me so much that, I mean, first off, that you're so emotionally invested, but the whole like, yeah, when Obama was elected, that was a bummer too, but we all went back to work. You even see it now, that people sobbing and crying and having whole days for events that are not like, it's not as if a parent had died or a friend or anybody close. It's not a personal thing, but it's a huge emotional investment anyways, which is, I don't know, it's bizarre to me.
It's also an excuse, I think, for people to delve into any addictions they have or coping mechanisms. Because, I had one friend who it became an excuse to be stoned 24/7 for like a week. I drank a lot more that week myself. It was like, let's just get drunk, right? Like I think it's an excuse for people to wallow. Poor me, I can't function, I can't work, because why? We elected a demagogue. But I don't want to minimize what they believe. They believed this to be true. The media, the machine, the cult of ideology that was pushing this idea that he was going to be rounding immigrants up and putting them in camps and gays and lesbians and putting them in camp. He was the first president elected who supported gay marriage when he was elected. Mm-hmm. And yet people thought, oh gosh, you got to put a safety pin on for your gay and lesbian friend. Why? He supports gay marriage. Obama didn't. Like, what? But people believed it, and I believed it too. Some of that stuff. I didn't think he was going to put people in camps, but I was very alarmed, and I did think we had elected a demagogue. And so the nature of my post was like, I know we're all grieving. I don't know how this happened. I never saw it coming. I can't believe America would do this. What has gone wrong in this country? How do we prevent this from happening in 4 years? Let's figure it out. And I remember one of the first things I posted was I saw this video from Jonathan Pye, who's a comedian in the UK, I believe. And he had done this kind of a rant, this character he does, but it was some very important stuff in the funny rant. And it was about what he was calling PC culture, which I immediately identified as he's talking about woke. And I was listening to it and thinking he's making a lot of great points that people would choose this. And again, at the time, I thought evil demagogue. People would choose this evil demagogue because at least he's standing up to all these problems I'm now seeing in woke. And I'm agreeing that these problems are there. And so I wanted to highlight, like, guys, look, we're driving people over to awful, awful people like Trump, right? Because of how awful we're becoming. But trying to have that conversation, no. Everyone in my circle was like, what are you talking about? They voted for him because they're racist and they're sexist. And I'm like, really? But look at the data. He got more, a larger percentage of the black vote than Mitt Romney did. He's got a growing percentage of the gay and lesbian vote. Like, what do you mean he's racist? I don't understand. Like, what do you mean? Those people, and plus I was reading all the stories of people who had voted for Obama twice, who then voted for Trump, and that was blowing my mind. And people who voted for Bernie, like I did, who voted for Trump. And I'm like, look at all these people. How can you say they're racist? They voted for Obama. And no, Keri, you can't have that conversation. This is your white privilege showing. I'm like, what? Like,
And part of the thing with Trump too, with addressing real issues, I remember somebody's Facebook post, and it's one of those things that you read and you're like physically shocked. You're like, somebody posted something this racist, unironically, in public, and it was about how Trump was elected because of basically all of you white redneck racists who were so unhappy because, you know, people of color are succeeding, and because your life is falling apart, you turned to this, you know, evil you don't truly understand because you're too stupid to even know how evil he is. And it's like, they, in the post, it was almost some points, it's like, you know, it's termed white death, where you have, you know, primarily suicides and drug overdose together, that number of people in rural white communities who the jobs are gone, they have nothing going for them, and those different issues that, you know, the opioid epidemic, as named, is a huge issue in these communities, and Trump was addressing that and other people weren't. Drugs coming in from the border, build a wall, he's like, oh, we have problems, let's get direct solutions. And that, you know, phrased as, that's because he's a horrible person, and not no, he's cutting to the quick and getting to real issues, sort of a thing.
Yeah. But keep in mind, if you're in that cult though,
True.
what you're seeing is, so what I had been seeing, what everyone was seeing in our cult, you never listen to his speeches in full.
Mm-hmm.
You never read his speeches in full. You see highly edited clips out of context that they just berate you with constantly, with a narrative attached telling you what it is and what to think about it.
Right.
So,
like
yeah.
The clip of him saying that there are good people on both sides during Charlottesville, is that where it was?
Yes.
Where that they cut out the entire part where he's like, dude, this was a terrible, terrible tragedy. Like, but they just cut it enough so that it looks like he's
that part, but nope.
And he called out white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He denounced it explicitly right before that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So all you would see, and by that point I had left the cult, so I saw the full speech. This is what I would say to anyone who's in social justice who might be watching this. I know that you have some social justice knitters who follow you. All I'm asking is for you to watch. This is what I did. I started doing. Just watch the full speech first. Just read it. You may still have the same opinion of him, but do you not trust yourself enough to as an adult who can reason, who can look at information and make your own opinion? Do you not trust yourself enough to go to the source and look at it? You know, why would you accept? I got to that point where I was like, oh, I hadn't even noticed it, because people don't notice they're doing it. I think they have Jordan Peterson. I heard him talking about received opinions. I had so many received opinions. I didn't even realize they were received opinions. I thought they were my opinions. And I heard him talking about received opinions and how, you know, one of the things he was saying is, do not lie. Do not lie. And it sounds so simple. Like, if you ask most people who are surface level, not awake, just coasting, they're like, yeah, lying's bad, man. Without ever thinking throughout the day consciously, how many times did I lie today? Is this a lie? And one of the things Peterson talked about being a lie is speaking opinions that are not yours, that you haven't put the work in to develop that opinion, speaking words that you think sound smart or opinions that other people have said that you think you agree with, but you haven't actually taken the time to evaluate it. That's a kind of lying. And so many people do that. And I was doing that for years without even realizing it. I thought I knew. I thought I had an opinion on Trump. I didn't. That opinion wasn't even mine. I thought I had an opinion on people like Ben Shapiro. I didn't. I had never listened to him. I laugh at it now, but that's the way it is with most people in a cult of belief. They don't actually interact with the source material, and yet they don't even realize that they're doing that. So if you ask them, did you lie today? They would probably say no without even thinking about it. And they would think they're telling the truth there, but they're not. So I know
Yeah.
I'm getting aggro, but it's like, if you're listening to this and you're social justice, just interact with the source material and see if it changes your mind. It may not at all,
Right.
but at least then, hey, I did that work. I listened to that speech and here's what I think about it.
That's a really good point. And it's not the same level as what you're talking about, but when I was being attacked really hardcore by the people, I was a racist, I was a homophobe, I was a transphobe, I'm a xenophobe, and I'm like, people, if you would talk to me, we could have a discussion, but you're just throwing everything you can that somebody else has said to see what sticks to me, see what's going to upset me or break me, yeah, I could end up having conversations with these people. We could go away not seeing eye to eye on anything, but at least you tried to interact. You didn't just say, oh, I saw that she made a Trump thing, and so therefore I hate her and she's terrible. Like, that's exactly what you're saying. And that's what
it's dishonesty. It's it's bad faith engagement. And deep down, you're cheating yourself when you do that. And also your words don't mean very much. I would say, like, I started thinking about all of my words and making sure I use the correct words. And even sometimes on podcasts, I'll correct myself. It's like, I've gotten much better about it's not the censorship. It's not what I used to do in a social justice cult. And a lot of them do is they have this internal censor and they run everything through the censor. Did I use a tripped word? Did I use one of the words we're not supposed to say now? Did I say spirit animal, which is now racist? Like, that's different. This is more about just making sure that your words mean something and that you truly mean what you're saying. It's also part of the reason I don't use sarcasm as much as I used to. I still think sarcasm is useful when it's the right tool for the job and it's very cutting when it's the right tool, but I don't use it so casually anymore. Like, because part of it feels just like, well, why wouldn't I just say what I actually think? Then what I mean by casually, this sort of a tangent, but so many people now will just fall into that really cheap, easy kind of sarcasm where, what's an innocuous example? Okay, like if you clean your plate, you're out to eat and you clean your plate and the waitress comes over and you're like, oh, I didn't like it at all. Okay, just say I loved it.
Right.
I mean, I will still do that sometimes. I'll still joke. And you said that's just an example of what I'm talking about, where people say the opposite of what they mean. It's gotten so common, and sometimes it's not worth it. It's not even a good tool, and it's not even funny. Just say what you mean. Just say this was freaking delicious meal.
This reminds me of a gal I know. She went to a Quaker church for a little while, and she was telling me about it. And she's like, I didn't realize that Quakers that they don't use hyperbole. So that she's like, because they want to be very accurate when they describe things. And this is something that I've struggled with and trying, like, no, bring it back. I want to say what I mean. And she'd be like, yeah, they were the best French fries I've ever had in my life. And they'd be like, oh, wow, these must be really incredible French fries. And she's like, okay, they were like an 8 out of 10, but they were really good. Like,
and that is exactly what I'm talking about. I've started toning down my use of hyperbole as well. it just happens naturally once you start thinking about your words and what do they mean. And even in, I know this is going to sound maybe crazy to people who don't do it, but it's not, I don't think it's crazy at all. Even in, if something is beautiful or joyful, or I'll say that, but if I'm like, that's awesome. Okay. I started thinking about, what does the word awesome mean? And it actually means inspiring of awe. I don't use that word as much anymore. I use it when it's something is really awe-inspiring, because I was like, I don't want to dilute that word so that it just means like, um, I I brought a donut home today, and awesome. It's not awesome. You just brought a donut home. Yay, thanks for the donut. Sorry, that's a tangent.
No, it makes sense too, because I mean, like in doing the show, it's like, okay, we cover the news. It's like, if I was just standing with you and we were talking wherever, and I was talking about a news story, then yeah, I'd be hyperbolic and I'd be making jokes. I'm like, accurate. You want to be as accurate as possible. And like, no, bring it back. This is exactly what I mean. I don't want to make it sound like, if people, because we have had people like, oh yeah, I tune into your show to catch up on the news, and I'm like, oh golly, why are you doing that? Go find other news sources. It's like, no, I want to be as accurate as possible. If people are,
Yeah.
coming in for a highlight, you don't want to misrepresent things to them. And,
Yes.
Right.
And even in a personal level as well as an online level.
Can I also add really quick, DK? If anyone reads me wrong, I'm not talking about nitpicking other people's language. I'm not. I'm talking about yourself. I don't care.
Actually,
I don't care what language other people use. And I'm sure I say things they're like, I hate that turn of phrase or whatever. Okay, I don't care what I'm talking about my words and what I choose to say, and words that I want to keep sacred for when they really mean that,
So last week, I think I was listening to not podcast. It was a Instagram live that Woke Knitter was doing, and she had a person on with her, and the person was talking about how, it was a white guy, and he was talking about how like white men are the standard, and then like the next person is like black men, like these different things. And he said, and on down to black women. And she jumped in immediately and corrected him and said, I don't think you mean down to black women, because that's so it's not that kind of correcting someone or yourself.
Right.
It's more of using, because I am the worst with sarcasm, and I did it my first co-op class. I said something super sarcastic to one of my students, and they just looked at me. And like, if I had said it to my kids, they would have been like, whatever, mom. But because it's just the way I speak, that sometimes, like, I've started thinking about it, like, if I say this, will my student know what I'm talking about? No? Okay, then I will just say what I mean. Whereas like with my kids, I kind of use it to tease them and stuff. And, words do matter, but there's a difference between like, Keri, you said down to black women. That's degrading to black women. No, it's more of a.
Whereas if it was just us hanging out, it'd be like, Keri, down to black women, I can't believe you said that, and then we'd laugh.
Yeah.
Like, oh no.
Yeah, and it's also when it's like in jest, like the example I gave with the waiter, that's just funny and silly. It's not that big of a deal. Like I said, I do that sometimes. Like, I didn't like it at all. But when you're trying to make a serious point online in a discussion, that's when I feel like it's a real waste, and it's really cheap, because a lot of times people will use it to put words. They're also putting words in the mouth of the person they're talking to. So I've seen this a lot, where you'll have maybe a conservative person who's arguing for better security at the border and enforcing our existing laws about immigration. And then you'll see a leftist say, oh, I guess we just should never let anyone in the country, huh? Like, let's just not ever let anyone in. That's great. It's like that. First of all, you're saying something as the leftist that you don't mean. You don't think that's a great idea. You don't guess that we should stop letting people in. So you're saying something you don't mean. And in doing so, you're trying to put those words in the mouth of this person, and they don't believe that either. It's so cheap. It's so dirty. Just say what you mean.
Exactly. I find that online, the best time to use sarcasm is when somebody is just being mean to you for the sake of being mean. And then I'll just say something dumb because then they don't know what to respond. Like there's, like you said, there's a time and a place. Like,
Yeah.
I think somebody kept calling me a racist. And so I used the line from The Princess Bride. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yes.
Because,
Well,
I mean, I'm not going to argue with you. So
there's like a delineation too when you're talking with somebody. It's like, okay, you start with presuming that it's in good faith, and then it isn't, and then it isn't. You're like, okay, I can mess with you now. Like you're not doing it
Yeah.
nice. You're not.
My favorite way to respond to someone who's using that kind of sarcasm in bad faith in a serious discussion is to respond as if they're sincere. And that's my favorite way of handling it. So, for example, a guy once, I think this was during the lockdown where there was a lot of debates about lockdowns. And what did he say? He said something about freedom because he was like, oh, my freedom, you know, I guess I should just be able to marry my sister. And I wrote, why would you tell me that you want to marry your sister? I don't, that's disturbing. And and then he spent the rest of the thread being like, no, I don't want to marry my sister. I was trying to say that we need to have, and I was like, but you did say you want to marry your sister. So I don't like, and
This is not the place to confess.
Yes. Or so I kind of love just doing the sincerity thing. And I know I'm on a boring tangent now, but this cracks me up. The other night, just to go back to the silly waiter example, my husband makes me laugh all the time. And he said from now on, when a waiter's like, oh, I guess you didn't love it at all, he's gonna be like, no, I loved it. It was great. I ate all of it. Like just like totally serious. Like it was awesome. Awesome. There you go. Sorry.
that's funny.
This
No,
is probably not why you wanted to bring me on to talk to me.
No, it's all right though. It's very, the Rush Limbaugh, words have meaning, and so much of the meanings have been subverted, and the words don't mean what the words are supposed to be. And back, you quoted Jordan Peterson, but that he says that if you can write clearly, if you can speak clearly, you can think clearly, and you can actually get to what you actually think about things, which is incredibly important. And I ranted to somebody the other day about there's no poetry being taught in schools, which it really is a tangent. And they're like, well, who needs the poets? I'm like, no, because poetry teaches you how to accurately describe things, that you have a wider vocabulary, and that it's not only the meanings of words, but the sound of words, so you can get the in-between thoughts, that you can capture the sound for which you don't have any words for yet. Like, no, we need to teach this in schools. And they're staring at me like, okay. I'm like, no, poetry is important, because if you don't have a wide vocabulary, you don't have as many words to think in. And you need those words to think in,
Yes.
because you need to imagine. And if you can't imagine concepts, you are limited in the way that you move around in the world. You need all of these things. And it is, the 1984 Newspeak is the most obvious set down example, where they cut words out of the language. You can only think about things in a certain way because you only have certain words for them. And even, you have pop culture shows that if you go online to discussions about pop culture shows, and, the Friday Night Tights people are fighting against that, but there's only one way to look at it. And it's the very social justice warrior way, that thinking about even a neutral storyline, that you only have one way to think about it, that you don't have the wider thought. And it's its own battle.
Yeah. Poetry is so important, actually. And there's a poet I'm going to talk to soon on, he's been on the Megyn Kelly show. His name is Joseph Massey. I love his poetry. He's been canceled. He's gone through cancellation, and he is so talented. It's almost like musical talent. It's that kind of thing where you just, it's hard to explain. You're so good with words and putting them in the right arrangement to evoke emotion and thoughts and memories and different specific things in each person. You draw that out of them like a musician, and I just admire it. So anyway, I can't do it. I wish I could be a poet.
I've never been that good at it, but this summer actually, because I'm going to teach my kids all summer, I've got a book of poetry, and it's like a journal, so that we can read it and the kids can draw pictures of what it means to them or how they feel. And I just thought it was so neat, because I remember learning poetry in school, and like they'd want you to memorize it, and you're going, oh, why are we doing this? And so I want it to be more of a experience. It's going to be we're going to learn all about it and how we feel in different things. And I think that's going to be so fun. Not really that relevant, but I just think it's going to be cool.
Right. So, I mean, even I find with, both in memorizing poetry or memorizing scripture, and you're a kid and you're like, yeah, whatever. But then later it comes back to you at weird times.
Mhm.
And even like if you don't know the whole poem, that, you have little phrases like Lady of Shalott, the mirror cracked from side to side. And you're like, well, that's cool. And then later you're like, or there's one, it was actually set into a Sting song. I can't remember who the poet was, but just a little phrase, on a day as cold as charity. And I'm like, oh, that's good. That's hardcore. Anyways, we should probably, I feel like we're getting a little off track here.
No, that's okay.
We talked a little bit about knitting at the beginning, but that you on your former channel broke a lot of the big knitting stories and then brought it to more of a forefront than it had been. I mean, you said talking with Maria Tuscan and all.
Yeah.
But, what first kind of turned you on to that story?
Well, actually, it was reading the Catherine Jepson Moore's coverage in Quillette. So Catherine Jepson Moore is an excellent reporter. She did a 3-part series on the knitting wars, and just diving into that and seeing what was happening there and recognizing it, because I've seen it in numerous ecosystems before. The same way that this ideology it's become mainstream. It's in all of our institutions. It's in the media. It's in our political parties, some of our churches, our corporations are speaking it now. It's also in our hobby groups. It's in, and I had seen the same thing unfold countless times when I was in the woke social justice cult. And like I said, I was kind of rooted in the feminist part of that cult. I saw it happen in the online feminist blogging world, where this mobbing would happen, where you would have these different, like, prominent feminist bloggers like Amanda Marcoux or Jessica Valenti from Feministing. And periodically there would be this mobbing and purging that would happen, because they would be even though they were woke, but they were successful. They had mainstream attention. And in fact, a lot of these early feminist blogs, the bloggers ended up going off to write for The Guardian and New York Times and stuff like that. But they had the most popular feminist blogs in the sphere. And so there would be these mobbings that would happen, and this tearing down of those at the top, and this resentment, and it would all be fueled by the ideology itself. So whatever part of your identity they can pick on to tear you down, they will. So even though Jessica Valenti, for example, is a ran feministing and speaks woke and is thoroughly woke, if they want to resentfully tear down someone at the top and climb up, what are they going to attack her for? Being straight and being white, And so these pile-ons would happen, and it would be these outright wars, these toxic wars going on in this little echo chamber of the feminist part of social justice. And I'd seen that happen before. And then when I read Catherine Jepson Moore's articles, and I started poking around online and looking at what was happening to the knitters, and it's like the same old thing, piling on. Like you said, DK, they go after the people who are easy targets first. Anyone who's not in the ideology first, go after those, take them out, right? Try and hurt their businesses, try and get them canceled, trying to make sure no one reads their blog, no one buys from their yarn, no one buys their patterns. Completely defame them and their character and call them all kinds of awful things, like racist and homophobic and what have you. They take those people out first, then they go after their own. And that's exactly what we mentioned at the top of the show had happened. Karen Templer, Maria Tuscan, and then they started going after people like Sockmatician, who was sort of one of their own, and then by extension people like Marie Buskey, and it was just that same old dynamic. So anyway, I'm rambling, but what I liked about the talking, covering the knitting wars, was that sometimes it's hard for people to see how this ideology operates on a large scale, and it's much easier to look at it on this small scale. If you can look at this one ecosystem and see how it operates here in the knitting world on Instagram, now if you can understand that, you can take it broad and see it how it operates on the large scale. And I was shocked when we did our first knitting episode, just at the response and all of the knitters, all the positive messages I was getting from people. And then knitting, I brought my crappy old knitting today, but I should have brought all the beautiful knitting stuff I've received over the past few years. I've gotten the most beautiful shawls, hats, the quilt, which makes me so emotional because it's the nicest gift anyone's ever given me. Just the amount of time and work that went into it, and how many people knit these squares. Thank you guys. For me and my husband, it's gorgeous. And I'm on the tangent. Anyway, I was surprised by the outpouring of support and by all the people who were interested, and I think people did. It was like, this is okay, this helps me understand what's going on in this world. And then we saw people start, there were already people pushing back on Ravelry, and then there were more people, and that's what happens is the more people who, if you get over your fear and you start speaking. Jordan Peterson helped me get over my fear. When I got over that fear, which took me about 6 months to say something, and then I started talking, what happens is you will find people coming to you. Whether it's on, you don't have to have a podcast. You can have a podcast, or you could just speaking, getting over your fear in your personal life with the people you know. You will have people come to you and say, you helped me get over my fear, and now I'm speaking. And then they will have people come to them and say, you helped me get. Isn't that amazing? So that was happening.
Yeah, no, there's something about, because after all the canceling, I mean, they've tried to cancel me more than one time, but good news, once you get canceled, you're kind of, there's not much else they can do.
Yes.
But it's hard. And sometimes you'll say something and people will pile on you, but there'll be that voice. It might just be one little email, or it might be a few that come through. And that's usually what happened to me. Like, I would kind of get into a phase where like people were kind of dumping on me, and I was, oh, why am I doing less? And then then you get the people who are like, I'm so glad you're doing this. And then it's like, okay, I remember why I'm doing it. And
yep.
And yeah, I mean, that's why the knitters love you, is because we kind of all felt we had been torn down and demonized. And then you guys came and you were like, hey, look at these knitters. These are just people. And they didn't do anything wrong. And then we were all like, oh, good. I'm glad somebody else sees that we're like not the white supremacists that Ravelry called us. And, it's, yeah.
And also, I mean, and you've been on shows with the nerd guys before, but it's one of those things where cancellation in the knitting world, and a lot of people laugh, and it is funny, but it's no, wait, this is a serious thing. Cancellation in the gaming world, oh, whatever. Canceling stuff in World of Warcraft, who cares about that? But it's like, but no, this is my thing. You're breaking my toys. Stop it.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
I think talking about it with the gamers has been so fun. First, because like you said, they think it's really funny, but also it helps people in these different ecosystems where they're watching this happen, be able to compare notes and see, oh, it operates the same way, whether it's in gaming or comics or knitting or the feminist blogs. It's always the same. You know?
There's a script, and they all get their notes, and you stick to it more or less. But was it hard for you when you finally like woke up? Like, we talked to Mike Harlow last week, and he said he lost like everybody, all of his friends, is that generally the MO?
Yes. I call it the great unfriending. The great unfriending, so that started happening to me 2016 to 2018 probably. really those first 2 years, 2016 and 17, when I first started talking about all this stuff. And when I got over, I mentioned it took me 6 months to get over my fear to say something. I know it was that amount of time because that was the amount of time between when I wrote a letter to Jordan Peterson to thank him and to tell him my story. And he read that letter on his channel, and I was terrified. Even though he changed my name and some identifying characteristics, I was still working in the comedy entertainment world. I was still in my old life. I was still pitching social justice shows, or not pitching. We were in the pitch process. We were at the end of one of those. Sometimes it could take a year or two. So I was at towards the end of this process with a very woke comedy show where 2 years ago I had helped write the treatment for this and the episodes, what was going to be in each episode. And then we pitched it. It's a long process to get, we got Lionsgate involved. You know, you get a production company involved sometimes, then you go out back to the network. We'd gotten a network involved. We had a network who was green lighting a pilot episode. They order a pilot, then they give you the money to make the pilot, then they decide if they want to pick it up for series or not. So I was still in that world, and I was trying to figure out, am I going to stay in this world? Am I going to leave this world? And he read that letter, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, what if people can tell it's me, because it mentioned comedy and stuff. I was so afraid, and I wrote to him and said, I'm really afraid. Thank you for reading it, but I'm very afraid. And he said, you have to get over that fear. And I knew he was right, but telling someone you need to get over that fear, it's not like, I'm over it. Like, it took me 6 months after that to get over that fear. 6 whole months. And when I finally was over it, I felt compelled. To write an essay to try and explain everything I'd been grappling with and all the like the awakening I'd had to what social justice really is and how it's the opposite of what it sells itself as. I wanted to explain that to all the people in my woke world, so they could understand. I mean, they're all calling each other, what's happening to Keri? So it's like, here's what's happening to me. So I wrote this essay called on leaving the social justice cult, or the SJW cult, and finding myself. And that was really my attempt. That was my audience, was fellow woke people. It was trying to explain it to them. And like, if I put it in these words, maybe they can understand it and see, maybe they're already seeing what I'm seeing and they know they're not alone, or maybe it helps them see it if I can word it the right way, and so that was, I put that essay out, and then I had already had some people in front of me. Well, then that was it. It was like, you're out. Like, the way my friend put it, the one who came to Texas, she said, it's not just that you're leaving the tribe. Humans are tribal. And I agree with her. We are. She said, you're not just leaving the tribe, you're attacking the tribe now. And so you can't come back after this. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to come back. I think it's an awful tribe. That's why I'm leaving. But understood. Like, and so, yeah, I was publicly denounced by some of my former friends, one of whom was a feminist media critic. And, we weren't just friends on Facebook in that way. We were friends. We used to get our nails done together. I lived in New York for a while with the social justice comedy show I was producing at the time. It was called Totally Biased with W. Kamau Bell on FX. It was a thoroughly woke show. I was an executive producer on that with Chris Rock. I fully believed in the wokeness. It was like, I thought we were changing the world, spreading this ideology. And she and I had been, when I lived in New York for that show, we became closer, and she lived there. And a lot of times when you're in that woke world, you make these woke alliances, and then some of them become, you think, your friends. But you all support. It's like wokeness comes first in the friendship. So she would write positive articles about my woke clients. And then in return, she would get to rub shoulders, elbows with them. What's the expression? Shoulders, elbows. She would rub elbows with them. And so, you have these relationships with woke journalists. They promote your woke comedians or your woke TV shows. And it's this back scratching thing. And, but we had gotten our nails done together and had, parties together and sleepover, I think, once. And anyway, this girl went on Twitter and said that I was her former feminist friend who had since become a red-pilled right-wing troll or alt-right troll. And
Wow.
that was the
And
offending.
back to our former conversation with being precise in your language. It's not a I disagree with you on these issues. That it's not a this and this do I disagree with you. It's again that hyperbole. You are the worst that ever was. It's not a we have this disagreement, and there may be other stuff we agree on, but we have this problem in our relationship. No, it's you got to take it to the extreme.
Mm-hmm. I was an unperson now, and there was also this plea, because when they do that publicly, they want the mob to pile on.
Right.
And so it was sort of this plea also to have her male allies to come, and they did. These men came to all these woke men started coming into my Twitter feed, attacking me on her behalf. And, that's just one example. There were lots of these unfriendings. And I had to leave, but that was okay. I left of my own choice what I was doing. I knew when I wrote that essay, I was done in entertainment because the niche I had built was woke. And then since then, entertainment's it's not just a niche anymore. It's all woke now. And I was coming out against woke. So it's like, okay, yeah, well, I guess I'm going to fold my company. Like,
would you ever consider producing comedy again in an unwoke sense? Or
yes, I would never manage again. Managing sucks because you are basically become a mommy to a lot of sometimes personality disordered people, or people who become demanding and become monsters, especially if they get fame. And I don't want to be a mommy to grown adults. So that was my experience of management, the negative side of it. There were a lot of positive sides. Management's great because you're sort of if you think of a comedian as a brand, or a musician, let's say you're a music manager, what's fun about it is you wear lots of different hats. You're like the CEO of the brand. And so you go out and you help them build their team. You help them get the agent, who's like, the agent is sort of like a VP of sales. They're going and booking gigs, right? You find the right agent. You help them find a book publisher if they're going to do a book. You help them find a record label if they're doing a record. You help them develop a TV pitch if that's what they want to do. You find a production company. You learn how to do lots of different things, put on tours, sell books, pitch to TV. So it's fun in that way. What's not fun is that mommy side of it with some people, where you're getting calls at 5:30 a.m. like, my limo driver's talking to me. Can you call him and tell him not to speak to me? And it's like, I'm in bed. You're in the car with him. Like, no.
Yeah, no. I wouldn't relish that part of it.
So no management, but producing, yes. Eventually, we have some ideas for Deprogrammed. My friend Mystery Chris does the fun like pop culture show with me on Wednesday nights. It's all about entertainment, and he is just a wealth of information. That's so much fun. Anyway, he's a great writer and he's so funny, and we have some ideas for comedy sketch videos that we want to do. And I know that's not the same as, on it doesn't matter. It's still the same in terms of producing on a small scale and just having fun.
Somewhere.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to that. I just want to have fun making some fun videos. So yeah.
That's cool. So when you left and now you're a Christian, so was that also a gradual thing? Had you been religious beforehand, or?
No, that was also gradual. Let me restate that. When I was young, I was raised Southern Baptist and I was a believer. But here's how long I was not a believer. I had almost forgotten about that. I'd almost forgotten. Isn't that crazy? How strong I believed when I was a child? How strongly I believed. I went back when I got a bunch of stuff from my childhood, when my dad visited, stuff from my grandma and some old childhood stuff, and in it was my childhood Bible. And there were, I was like crying reading this because there were all these things I had, like notes I had taken. I was really into it and trying to talk to God, and I'd forgotten all about that. Which is amazing. But yeah, I most of my life I was a non-believer. I was an agnostic. I would say that started around when I was 16. I went to a science and math high school in South Carolina, and it was one of the best things that ever happened for me. It was a real blessing to be able to go there. You live there. It's a boarding school for taxpayer funded, and you get to have this amazing education for 2 years. And but while I was there, I started questioning that childhood faith. I started questioning a lot of things, and I think rightfully so. I think any belief system should encourage questions. That's how you know it's not a cult. but I questioned things, and I got to this place where I eventually I no longer had that belief in God. And I think I was probably angry at God, honestly, for things in my childhood. That probably. And what happened to me now on the outside of it, looking back, I can understand it better, is I went into college. I went to Duke University, and at that time, woke was really just limited. It wasn't in the hard sciences, but it was in my minor. My minor was women's studies, and that's where I got all this stuff. And it functions like a religion. It fills that hole. It gives you meaning and a way to look at the world and order it. Now, it's a chaotic order, and it contradicts itself, and it's totally hypocritical, but it is a belief system. And if you don't have a
It
system
gives
of
you
belief,
a catechism,
right.
a path answer for things.
Yes, it tells you this is the best way to look at the world. It tells you specifically in social justice, it says the world is a struggle for power between identity groups. And all of these groups, these different identity groups, are divided into oppressor and oppressed, just like the Marxists did. Or they use the words privileged or marginalized. And so we have to redistribute power among these identity groups. And there's all the systemic oppression that's happening everywhere. And every situation you go into, it's not a question of if racism happened or if sexism happened. It's where is it? Let's find it. And that's the blueprint it gives you, the glasses that you put on to look at the world. And what a different belief system than Christianity. But all these people in it, that's why I think it has such a strong hold on people, because that's their faith. They don't even realize it. Most of them, I considered myself agnostic. A lot of them who are in woke, they consider themselves atheist, agnostic. Some of them consider themselves Christian, which blows my mind. Like, no, dude, like you think you have a bigger God. It's called social justice. That's who you put up here. But yeah, it functioned like that for me. And long answer, how did I become? Well, when I left it, it also makes sense to me that hole was there. It's like, okay, I tried to fill that hole for 20 years with this faith, and it leaves you empty. It's not there for you. There's nothing there for you when you're at the darkest place. There's no grace. There's no redemption. And the meaning that it offers you is kind of gross. Like, the meaning is about going out and tearing people down and looking for racism and sexism everywhere, and it's just gross. And so it makes sense to me that God started calling me. I could hear God finally after all this time. And so yeah, I started going to around the same time I was leaving my religion, my social justice religion. I started going to a spiritual center in Los Angeles. I was still in LA at the time. And I was really kind of looking for, what is there a God? I became consumed with the question of, do we have a soul? Like, what are we just this physical body and a computer brain, or do we have a soul? What are we? What separates us from the animals? And so that path, it was a circuitous path, but I eventually wound up at the Church on the Square in Georgetown, Texas, which is an amazing, I can't even believe that's a miracle. If I didn't already believe in God, now I'd be like, okay, because he just happens to be in my town. What? Like, this is the best church for me, for who I am, where I'm at right now. Like, the best pastor, the best congregation and group of people. And
which has recently had problems of its own fighting social justice.
Oh yes. Yeah. There's a big cultural battle. I mean, every little town I feel like is probably going to become a cultural battlefield at some point. And so that's happening in Georgetown now. And our church just got evicted from our meeting place because my pastor and two mothers from our church spoke at a city council meeting. Well, we think it's because of that. It was following that. They spoke at a city council meeting against a grooming mural. I do call it a grooming mural. It's a mural that Forbes Middle School had these 10 to 13-year-olds paint with the transgender flag, the non-binary flag, the pansexual flag. It's like, why are you instructing 10-year-olds to paint symbols that have specific meaning related to sexuality and to gender ideology? That's a part of woke. So he spoke against it, and we had been renting from the Palace Theater, who they're all connected. It's the arts community here in Georgetown. So we think that's why he got this letter following that saying you're immediately evicted. We're going to refund your rent. And so we've been meeting outside since then for 3 weeks, and it's actually beautiful. It's kind of like an old-fashioned service. I bring parasols. There's another lady that brings fans, I bring Tiger because he can go. It's an outdoor service. I'm like, why not come to church?
Actually, Tiger, you need religion.
Yeah.
No, anybody who says that that's not grooming, I don't know how you can justify that. I mean, my one child's turning 9 this weekend, and I know that a lot of the reason that they don't think about things that kids that are 9 do is because we homeschool, before they were homeschooled, they were in a Christian school, but there's no talk of it. They're kids. They are playing. They are doing kid things. There's nothing to do with sexuality and for anybody to be like, oh, it's natural. It's natural if you're putting your kid in the situation where they have to deal with that. Whereas my husband and I have decided that we're going to keep our kids in a situation where they're loved and they can do what they want to do, and they don't have to worry about any of that, and it doesn't come off. And it's not that we would never talk to them about it, but is it appropriate to talk to a 9-year-old about that? I don't really think so. I don't know. And if they were in a school and they wanted them to embrace that, oh my God, my head would explode.
Yeah.
They would be out of school so fast.
Right.
I couldn't even.
With young kids too, talking about sexuality early. Well, it's the sort of, when a kid gets in there, like, oh, there's something over here that people don't want me to see. It's curious. It reorients their mind. They want to learn more about that. And especially when it's been presented to them so young before they have emotional maturity for sexuality, it is very destructive.
It's also, especially with the gender ideology part of it, and I think some of the best voices against this are trans adults, people who've experienced what used to be called gender dysphoria. People like Buck Angel, Sarah Higdon, Blair White, people who are saying what you're doing to children by putting this in elementary schools is you're taking something that has only ever affected a fraction of 1% of people. And you're telling little kids that it's normal for 100% of people to decide if they're born in the wrong body or not. You're putting that in their head here when it wasn't there before. And that is disgusting to put that onto kids. And that's why we're seeing all of these huge numbers of mostly girls who are so-called transitioning in adolescence and then in young adulthood trying to detransition now.
Yeah.
After having, in some cases, have had a double mastectomy, taken hormone blockers, which affect the reproductive system, or taken cross-sex hormones, which affect the reproductive system. And some of these young women have sterilized themselves effectively. And we're not protected by the adults in their lives, or by the school system, or by the doctors. So that's a bit of a tangent too, but yeah, that's why we're speaking out against that mural. It's like, no, Why are 10-year-old, are they capable of even understanding what these symbols mean? And if they are they capable of consenting to painting them? Do their parents know that they're painting them? Did they even know what the symbology is? Or did you not tell them what these flags mean? Did the parents consent? Like, there are so many questions around that, and it is completely inappropriate for public school with taxpayer funded to indoctrinate kids in that way. It is a kind of grooming.
It is. And these kids are young. They're what, 10, 12 when they can decide what they're going to do and if they're going to transition and take hormones. And the tragedy happened in Texas this weekend, or this week, not this weekend, just 2 days ago. And now my governor is saying that people who are under 21 should not be allowed to own a gun. So it's the blatant hypocrisy too. So here I am, I can't own a gun if I'm 21, but I can decide to transition. It's all of these there's a mishmash of it only when it works for our narrative. And I'm not saying that what happened isn't terrible, but owning a gun at 21 isn't an answer. Transition at 12, like there's just so many. I know I'm talking about two totally different issues, but you get what I'm.
No, it's complete contradictions. They say that they're old enough at 4, at 2. I'm in a lot of these groups on Facebook for parents of supposedly trans kids, and it's disturbing. It is an absolute cult environment. If you're a parent who comes in there looking for advice and you don't immediately follow the orthodoxy, you're out. And they just, from no matter how old the kid is, 2, 3, 4, validate, immediately tell them that they are that sex, they are that gender. And so, yeah, they're saying these kids are capable at as a toddler to define if they were quote unquote born in the wrong body. No one's born in the wrong body. You're born in your body. Like, that's your body. Okay. And if you experience dysphoria with that, that's one thing that can be talked about. And as an adult, I don't care what you decide to do, but for kids to say that they're capable of understanding and consenting to puberty blockers, to Lupron,
that they are destroying children on their most intimate level before they can understand what that means. On a very these are your body, but also your sexuality, your ability to have children before they realize the impact of that. And it is truly disturbing.
Yeah, it is. And it's so easy for those parents to just fall into that too, because like I have a kid who spent like a year being Peter Pan. So if I was a woke parent, well, guess what? They'd probably be transitioning now because they spent a whole year being Peter Pan. Nobody ever like stops and thinks like, hey, maybe my kid likes the fantasy of what Peter Pan represents. It's not just like, oh, they're being a boy, so therefore they're a boy. No, it's their kid. They're pretending. It's normal. It's normal to pretend and play and push the boundaries of things and see what your parents say. Sorry. It's
a depressing talk. I could get more depressing with it, the stuff I've read in these forums, but I won't. I don't want to derail this too. It's pretty bad though. It's bad. Like in these groups, Colin Wright, I just got to interview him. He's a biologist. He's been writing about a lot of this lately. He and I were comparing notes beforehand. We're in some of the same groups seeing this stuff, and he and his girlfriend have been covering a lot of the stuff that's going on in these private Facebook groups and the kind of coercion that's happening from the parents towards the kids in some cases.
Yeah,
it's really too sad.
I'll offer a bit of levity. Tiger came to say hello. Excuse me. We are renovating, my husband and I, this beautiful old house. And yesterday he tore out the mantle over here. So there's no wall anymore between my room and his room. his what's going to be his studio. So Tiger just walked on in because there's no wall. It's like, let me go say hello. I can't shut the door on him now. We're putting the mantle back, but we're having to move it back because they got rid of that chimney and everything. So anyway, this is my doggy.
Anyways, there we go.
That's cool.
Little puppy.
Did you want to talk about what happened this week at the elementary school, or is that not something?
Well, yeah, I'll talk about what happened in Texas. I think my immediate thought was, here we go again, in terms of the national conversation that's happening around this, having nothing to do with the problem, in my opinion. And my immediate thought was, if the news media and if the politicians want to get to the root of what causes someone to commit this kind of evil, they should be talking to someone like Jordan Peterson. He has spoken about the Columbine shooting, and I can't remember, these are probably old videos of his I watched, but I've heard him talk about it before, and I was struck by what he was saying, because I'm someone who's interested in true crime, and I think that stems from, a lot of women are interested in true crime. I think it stems from wanting to better understand people and disordered people and evil and what leads a person down that path. And I had read the Columbine diaries, the journals, and I also listened to the basement tapes, and he had as well, Peterson. I heard him talking about it and saying, you know, if you read what was in the Eric Harris's journal, he was saying, this is not just a person who is depressed and wants to commit suicide. This is a person who despises the nature of being itself, despises life itself, and wants to kill themselves and as many other people as they can, because that's how much resentment they have. He compared it to like Cain and Abel, the murderous resentment, like where the path of Cain takes you, that resentment towards life. And that's what's happening. And with people who I think he's right. That's what's happening with people who would do this, who would pick up a gun and go into a school and cut down innocent children that they don't even know. Like, how do you get there as a soul? And no one is going to have, in the public space anyway, I don't think, the media, the politicians, they're not going to talk about that. They're going to use this, in the words of Rahm Emanuel, right? Who said, never let a crisis go to waste. He said, it gives us an opportunity to do things we didn't think we could do before. That's how they're treating it immediately. They're like, okay, we're going to use it to try and restrict gun rights to further. They used COVID in the same way. They used COVID to restrict personal liberties. They used this awful virus to take liberties and freedoms away from the people. They're going to use this to try and do the same when it comes to your right to defend yourself and to arm yourself. And it's not going to stop a single one of these things, because I get into this argument with people sometimes. They don't seem to understand. They buy into all the hype. First of all, they want to target, I think some of them are specifically, they want to target rifles, which rifles only account for 3%, less than 3% of gun deaths a year. So what are you really doing there? That tells me what you're looking for is a virtue signal and a pat on the back. We got rid of this one type of gun that accounts for less than 3% of gun deaths. Okay, well, why'd you do that? Because it's cosmetically scary looking, and we think we can get it we can attack it better than we can attack handguns, which are responsible for the majority of gun deaths. There are fewer deaths by rifle per year than there are from hammers and fists. You can look this up.
Let's get rid of hammers, because there's more deaths by them than.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you look in Asian countries where you see these spree stabbings, mass stabbings, you're not getting rid of human desire to hurt people. If you look in the UK, and you look in France, and you look in these places where there's a lot of radical Islamic bombings, or where people
Yeah.
take control of vehicles. Look at that massacre that happened here in the States where someone just ran people over in a parade with a car.
Right.
You're not getting to the root problem here if you're attacking a tool. And by the way, you're attacking a tool that people have a right to own to protect themselves. You're attacking a tool, you're not attacking the problem, and we're going to see it happen again. And on top of that, I know you have limited time, but yesterday I was so disgusted. I was at a car dealership and they had a television playing Abbott's Governor Abbott here in Texas. They had a press conference for the families who were grieving with the mayor of Uvalde. And I haven't watched a lot of him. I know my gut impression of him is he kind of sways with the wind. He's not a very strong character. But I was watching him there and he seemed very sincere to me. And I thought he is speaking honestly and sincerely. At least that was the impression I got in a really unimaginable circumstance. And I stepped away before I saw what happened next. Last night I saw what happened next. Beto O'Rourke was sitting in the front row. And when Abbott turned to the lieutenant governor for his turn to speak, Beto O'Rourke thought it was appropriate to stand up in a room full of grieving parents at a press conference about the facts of what happened and to start yelling in a campaign stunt. He's running against Abbott, to start yelling at Abbott and saying, the blood is on your hands. This was entirely predictable. Bullshit. I don't know if I can curse on them, but that is so gross. It's disgusting. It's filthy to stand.
Yeah.
Those kids aren't even in the ground yet, and you're standing on their graves for a campaign stunt to get points in a campaign. What is wrong with you?
Right.
And the mayor had to tell him to get the F out.
Yeah. But I think that you said it perfectly. What people don't ever notice is that when there's evil inside of somebody and they want to hurt other people, they're going to do what they can. They don't care. You can put restrictions on them. I just saw an article about a guy in Germany that entered a place with a crossbow because they don't have guns. So therefore he's going to use what he can use to get in there and harm people. And so, it's easy to virtue signal and say, hey, let's get rid of guns. But is that really the answer? There's a big article about a gun buyback. And we'll take legal or illegal guns. Who's going to put their guns in that gun buyback? It's going to be people with legal guns. It's going to be the people who follow the rules. And then who's going to have all the guns? It's not going to be us.
Right.
And I don't want to be like that. But sorry, Ann.
No, I was going to say, and like you were saying, with a gun being a tool, not the problem. It's a tool to a problem. So if there's an active shooter, okay, what is going to stop an active shooter? Another gun. Guns are a great equalizer. You can be big and strong and on drugs, and you can be a little tiny woman, but you have a gun, you're equal.
Yeah.
Back and forth between that. And okay, that, if you have an active shooter situation, what the old phrase, what's going to stop a bad guy with a gun? A good guy with a gun. And if you're like, okay, well, regular people shouldn't have guns, but who are you going to call? The police who have guns. Yeah. And if you have regular good people who are armed, they can stop that problem much more quickly, much more efficiently. And there's, how many cases per year that we have where violent crime is stopped with weapons, with gun, with saying, hey, don't come in, I'm armed. That changes the situation entirely. And it's the gun-free zones. It's the innocent kids who aren't protected. It's those areas that are most at harm by these people who want to harm as many people as possible.
Yeah. They don't talk about the cases like the church shooting in, was it Tennessee, where a guy brought a gun into a church. Well, first of all, they didn't talk about that one because the guy was black and it didn't fit their narrative at the time. And another person with a gun stopped him. They don't talk about those stories because they don't fit the narrative. But I'll tell you what, if you look throughout history, every authoritarian regime has sought to disarm the populace that they want to control. And that's what's happening here. And they'll use anything. They don't have any shame. They'll stand on the graves of these kids to disarm the populace if they think they can. Like Rahm Emanuel said, never let a tragedy go to waste, never let a crisis go to waste. They will use it to do that. And look at what's happened in places like New Zealand where they did this. I don't think they would have been so docile when the government during COVID tried to behave in such authoritarian ways and did one of the most restrictive lockdowns of any country. I don't think the population would have been so docile, except just like when you roll over to a social justice mob, you've already said, you can put your foot on me. Like, you can put your foot on me. And you know what? You cannot put your foot on me in America. You want to make it so that the government is the only person who gets to have a gun. There's a gun in a room. Who gets to control it? There is no government that can tell me I don't have a right to that tool to defend myself. You will not put your boot on my neck.
Right. It's giving up your agency.
Yes.
It's okay. What do I control about myself? Do I control my own protection? Do I control my own health? Do I control it's like, who is responsible for keeping me safe, and who knows best about what I need? I do, not somebody else, me. I know, what I need to protect myself and my family, is opposed to, oh, well, whatever the government does has to be okay.
Yeah. Frickin' way.
So, Keri, you have a channel that you share these opinions on. How many times a week? At least twice, right?
Wow.
Several times a week.
So we do 4 videos a week. We do I do a live show on Mondays and Fridays at noon Texas time, and that show is called Kerfuffle Break, and we do it live. And usually on Mondays I have a couple of like different semi-regular co-hosts that I'll bring on. I've been kind of cycling through different guys I like talking to, sort of in that one-on-one conversation style, which I really appreciate, because I think sometimes when it's more than just one-on-one, it can go off on different tangents more often. So that's what happens on Mondays anyway. On Fridays, it's more of a group style, fun, frivolity, have different guests on. We talk about what's in the news or what's in happening in our lives. And Wednesday nights, I co-host with my friend Mystery Chris. That's the pop culture show. That's his domain. Although I did the topic last night, the Hayes era, with all about censorship in film. But he has so many interesting topics that we're going to cover on Wednesday nights. And then Thursdays. So tonight, Thursdays are when I release my interviews, and those are specifically about deprogrammed interviews, are about social justice ideology and better understanding it. And so tonight, my interview is with comedian Lila Hart, who is a Filipina, little person comedian who has survived cancellation when she actually ended up moving from California to Texas, because the comedy clubs in California wouldn't allow her to perform unless she had a vax card. So I'm very excited to speak with her. That's tonight at 6:00 Texas time.
Well, that will have already come out by the time that this has come out.
So
yes,
that's back then.
Yeah.
You can go find it.
Yeah, we come out on Saturdays. So
okay.
But if you guys want to find Keri, and if you've enjoyed what she's had to talk about, we hit on a ton of different topics, and we probably could have talked for several more hours. But yeah, she does this a lot during the week, so you can find her. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on. It's just been wonderful, and you're someone I've admired for a long time. And so I'm excited that you finally got to come on our show. It's been great.
Thank you, ladies. I'm so honored that you would ask me, and that I get to hang out with real knitters, and you didn't laugh too much at my old knitting. And I think what you're doing is amazing. I think you are, well, DK, I mean, you're the most dangerous knitter online, apparently. The most banned. That should be in your bio.
Yeah. I'm something.
Yeah. And anyway, I've enjoyed getting to know you guys better, and I'm so happy. Let me just come hang out and talk about whatever's on our minds, even even stuff about, even silly stuff, the stuff about when a waiter says you didn't enjoy that at all.
Well, yeah, that's Anne and I like to do that. You got to have a little bit of levity in there. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the one that tends to bring us down, and Anne is the one who tends to bring me back up. So we're lucky to have that.
Beautiful tomorrow, shining at the end of every day, as the Disney song goes.
Exactly. And guys, don't forget to check out Chicken Lady, and I will give you a sneak peek. But this is one of her yarns, and it is going to be a giveaway for our anniversary month, which starts in June. So Chicken Lady Fiber Arts, check her out. She's got 20% off yarns with the code PIK Mayday 20. And so, Keri, thank you. Anne, thank you. You guys are excellent. We will see you again soon.